Hello, students and parents, and welcome to Dear Applicants, a show where we offer you first-hand insights into the university admissions process. I'm your host, Jonathan, and with me today is Qihan. Qihan is from Singapore, went to Hwa Chong Institution and studied at Yale, where he got his BA in economics. Upon coming back to Singapore, he served in the Ministry of National Development as well as the Ministry of Finance, and now works as an agency product lead at Google. Qihan also works with IvyPrep, where he developed our profile building curriculum to help students build a strong portfolio of activities in the lead up to their applications. He now oversees our profile building program and trains new consultants as well. So thank you, Qihan, for joining us. How are you today?
Thanks, Jonathan, for having me. Good, I'm doing very well. How about you?
Very well. I really appreciate you running down here after work, but I think we can sort of just jump straight into the history of your education, as it
Let's
were.
do it.
So you went to Hwa Chong. What was your time there? Did you feel as though it prepared you academically for your time in the US?
So I went to Hwa Chong for 6 years. I was 4 years in the high school and 2 years in JC. And in JC, I was in the humanities program. It's a very long-standing program. My teachers have been there 30 years, and they're all British.
Oh,
So
okay.
surprisingly, I ended up in the US, which is not the strong suit of Hwa Chong. All of them were very, very well versed in the UK system. While we're doing the A-levels, I did history, econ, did math. And so I always thought that I was going to go down this academic route, taking social sciences or humanities. And I didn't really consider the US until much later. In Hwa Chong, it was a lot of focus on doing well for A-levels, right? So I would say, yes, it prepared me well in terms of the intellectual rigor, in terms of exam taking. And all these are skills that are really important when you go to university. But there are things that it didn't prepare me for, like how flexible the US system is, the freedom to decide on many, many things yourself, ranging from what classes to take, what living arrangements you want. All these are things you learn and you pick up when you enter college. So I think a lot of it was a mix of academic preparation that was really good, but when it comes to like life in university, that is where I found it. There could be things that could be improved there.
Okay, so there could be a middle ground that could be found, essentially.
Sure, yeah.
So to that extent, what were the major differences that you perceived between the education systems in Singapore and the US, and maybe not just the education systems, I guess even life in an institution, right?
Yeah. So just touching on the academic point, UK is a lot about deep specialization, right? You apply to the college, you apply to a course, you can't change it unless you go through a very lengthy approval process.
Right.
US, flexibility. You go in without a major. There's something called shopping week at Yale. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I am.
2 weeks where you go to any class you want, and the most popular ones are always oversubscribed. People sitting on the floors, people trying to like stick their heads into the lecture theater to get a sense of what classes are, how they are taught, who the professor is. So that alone really like symbolizes the flexibility and exploration that US curriculum gives you. So I think the education philosophies are wildly different. When it comes to student life, I can't really speak to the UK. I never really studied there. But in the US, a lot of it was on campus. At Yale, I stayed all 4 years on campus. So I was very much embedded in school life, embedded in the residential college system. And out of the 6 suite mates, so I had 6 suite mates, 5 of them were American. I have 5 suite mates, so there were 6 of us. 5 of them were American, and there was me. And we stuck it out, almost all of us stuck it out throughout all 4 years together as we progressed from freshman to senior year. Yeah, many people don't end up together. There's always some disagreement, but somehow we just clicked.
Yeah, I started out with 5 other suite mates, and I ended up with just one, sticking through with just one all the way till the end. So
yeah.
Quite a testament to your bond, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's strange because we all were very different academically. I was the only social science major.
Okay.
And then most of the other people were engineers. So I had an electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, a chemical engineer, and one other econ person.
Did you ever look into how you guys were assigned? Was it just random? Or
yeah.
Any sort of...
Funny story. So in my common app, I wrote all about my time in the army in NS.
Okay.
So I positioned myself as a leader. I had 20 men. I led through missions, training. So I think the impression I gave was, this stereotypical military macho persona. And when I got to my suite, I got a sense of how they allocated me, because there was a boxer, there was a swimmer, there were people of very, very with very physical hobbies, right? And I think they thought we would be a very athletic suite, which we were, but there were certainly some expectations to be adjusted, because I'm not that much more athletic anymore. I was a bit more in school, but when I got to college, I didn't do sports as much. So yeah, there was a bit of a gulf, but we got over it.
Okay, so and I'd love to talk a little bit more about your time at Yale as well as your time in the Army. But before we get there, before you became a macho man, you were still back in Hwa Chong. A very common, I'd say, lament that we get from a lot of students and even parents that we meet is that with a very hectic school schedule, right? I mean, like you said, in Hwa Chong, there was a massive emphasis on A levels, and you're constantly doing tuitions, classes, doing all sorts of practice papers. That amidst that busy schedule, they don't have a lot of time to pursue activities that they're interested in. Yes, they have a CCA, but for example, if their CCA is touch rugby or swimming or track and field, as I think it was for you, then that sort of soaks up all their time and they don't get to explore anything else. And so then when we talk to them about what admissions officers or admissions tutors in the US and the UK are hoping for, they just don't understand how a lot of students are able to build their profile. So how did you manage to do that?
100%. Being a student is tough, I would say. My typical day always started at 6 a.m. when I woke up. I got to school by 6:30 for a quick nap. Then classes, will run typically past lunch to 2. And oftentimes I would have dinner in school and then continue with my extracurriculars. So I would do track and field in the afternoon, 3 to 6, have dinner. And then we have council activities from 6 to 10.
Okay.
And then I'll get home at 11-ish to finish some work, go to bed at 12, and then, you restart that cycle. So your main asset is time, and it's about how you manage it. And I think as a student, you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of flexibility, and you should use your time as best as you can. And that's what I did. And I don't regret putting myself out there and just being in school, doing different things, trying out different things, meeting new people all the time. So yeah, I got very little sleep, pretty common for many students. And I know how it feels to be sleep deprived. But yeah, it's that moment in time in your life when there's no other responsibility but to study, but to explore. And I think that's a really valuable part of your life.
So athletics and the student council then appear to be the two big activities that you did. But you also said that, something that you'd recommend is to never stop trying new things. And you were constantly meeting new people and trying new things. Were any of those things notable?
So I was doing track for about 5 years in Set 1 through J1. And then council was something I always did throughout 6 years.
Okay.
So I didn't change my CCAs a lot, but so the things I pursued within each CCA varied. Like I tried out for different roles, ranging from being the welfare person, taking a leadership role as vice president, or running different events. So I think that's how I got exposure. And one part I really enjoyed was taking part in school conferences, because that's when you can interact with students across schools. Things like MUN, things like international exchanges. I think those were very valuable and fun parts of my school life.
Where did you go for your international exchanges?
Oh, so I did one in The Hague, Cayman, if you've heard of it.
I have.
So I think it was one of the very first few iterations. Before that, I've only ever gone to Hong Kong. That was my furthest overseas experience. So I think just having a school fly me to Europe and being in Europe for the first time and being surrounded by people of all cultures, having like a cold sandwich for lunch, hated it. I think that
just
was
bread and cheese over there.
Yeah, bread and cheese, and it comes in a plastic bag and stacked on top of one another. Not great, but yeah, the experience looking back now was just really nice to have that broad international exposure through these conferences.
Do you think that conference was formative in then helping you figure out that you wanted to go abroad for university, or more specifically to the US at all?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So being in the local system all the time, I did feel very stressed. And when I spoke to my counterparts in Europe, they seemed pretty happy, right? And the school systems were structured in a very different way. And I was always curious about, is there a different life to be had in school? And of course, I was hearing things about local systems versus overseas systems. And the difference is pretty stark, just in terms of the rigor and competitiveness. So I thought I wanted to get away from it. And it's really a good time to free up yourself from the constraints of what I've grown up with. And I think the early 20s, late teens are a really good time to be able to do that.
Was the grass greener on the other side?
Oh, yes.
It was, okay.
Oh, yes.
And yet you came back to Singapore. I mean, obviously you did have to serve
yes.
in various ministries for a few years, but then you stuck around. Any plans to move around, or is Singapore?
Oh, yeah. I see it as part of a journey. So I started in Singapore. I'm still in Singapore. Doesn't hold me back from going elsewhere. And with a job, I think in a multinational firm, it's really easy to transfer. Not given current circumstances, the recession, but when things pick up, it's always boom and bust. There are opportunities that will come, and I'll take them.
It's certainly not difficult for you to travel with that red passport either. But so moving back to your extracurricular, so you had mentioned MUN and stuff. Were you at all intentional about building your profile and thinking about university while doing these activities, or was it more of an organic process where you were just exploring and figuring out what you liked and didn't like?
Yeah, for me, it was a bit more organic. Okay. And one thing I wish was that I had a consulting service like what IvyPrep provides, right? Where you have someone to be a sounding board, point you in different directions, expand your horizons. For me, it was more doing what I knew was familiar and I found exciting. Okay. And that's in terms of student leadership, of competing in track and field. Every year saw new things, new people, and I wasn't actually, I was always interested in the things I was doing.
And what would you say were the most important, and I know this is hard to say because there's no way that you know what the admissions officers thought of your application, but when you were writing it, what do you feel as though were the centerpieces of your application, or the cornerstones even? Yeah,
so it depends on whether you're talking about the UK or the US.
So I think perhaps the US, since we've been chatting about Yale for a bit.
Yeah, so the US, the cornerstone will really be my military experience.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote my personal statement based on one incident so I was in charge of 20 men, and one of them during a training exercise destroyed an equipment unintentionally. And I wrote about my experience and emotions dealing with that. Like, what is my reaction to that? Do I start to investigate the cause? Do I start to point fingers? How much blame should I put on the person versus my leadership? So it was a lot of questioning what my style was and interrogating myself through that process, right? Having that situation, how did I react? Did I do what I wanted to do well? And then what lessons could I draw from it?
So sort of a story about, well, definitely talking about a leadership experience, but more, again, I think what stands out is that there was a certain amount of reflection, and then you take away learning from that experience, which is what admissions officers are hoping for, right? To see you constantly reflect. But just out of curiosity, what was important to you when you were doing your UK applications?
UK was all about my intellectual interests.
Okay.
So in the UK, I applied for PPE. And I really love the combination because it spans, first of all, 3 subjects. It's like doing 3 majors in one. And I am a deeply curious and intellectual person. So I like to go deep into ideas. I can spend 2-3 hours debating with a friend on the morality of climate change, for example. Right? So I really found my footing in the UK system by reading a lot.
Okay.
So I wanted to go beyond my curriculum, and in each of the P, and E, there is a wall of readings that you can do. And it's always changing. You can go back 2,000 years. You can try and trace the history and the development of each subject. You can read about current events, how interpretations change over time. And all of this was really good preparation for me in terms of writing a coherent and deep personal statement, as well as through the interviews. Because when you apply to PPE and you do the interview, you get 3 professors.
Right.
And you have to be able to switch very quickly in between the domains and also draw links between all the 3. So it was all about my interest and presenting that I am quick-witted, I know a lot, and I'm able to present arguments in a coherent and convincing way.
And the interview being the final hurdle, right, for your Oxbridge applications, and often the stumbling block, right, for a lot of students around the world. How did you find that experience? Because we get mixed results. Some people are terrified. Some people love that intellectual debate or like engagement with these professors. So how was yours?
Yeah, so my advice here would be you need to first know how you learn best. And for me, I was quite what they call an ambivert, I guess, where I was in between learning by doing and learning by reading. And I could pivot either way. And in that sense, it wasn't that scary to me. But if you know, for example, that you do better through like talking to people, if your strengths are more the soft in terms of communication, in terms of problem solving, but not in an academic way, in a real life setting, the US system may be more suited for you. But if you are intellectual, you want to pursue something deeply, maybe you want to do a PhD, then the UK style of education would fit you very well. And it reflects in the application process because what they want to see in terms of your materials, in terms of how you present yourself in interviews is different. So I was talking about the Oxford PP interview. There were 3 professors grilling me about what is philosophy, what is my favorite economists, like what do you think of Keynesianism, for example. But in the US, it was a very different setting. First of all, it's in Starbucks in Tanglin Mall.
With an alumni.
With alumni.
Yeah.
And my interviewer came in shorts, slippers, was really casual and started off with, what are you most interested in life right now? Right? What was the favorite book you have read in the past 2 years that wasn't part of your class? So you can really see through the process what they value. And actually the interview process, I encourage you to go for both. And that's also a way for you to find out what style suits you better.
And it's sort of surprising to me because from everything that you've been saying, it sounds like, again, you've told me that you're somebody that likes to go very deep. You like these intellectual debates. You can go on for hours. And it sounds like you enjoyed the interview as well.
Yes.
So having gotten into the Ivy Leagues on one hand and then Oxford PPE on the other, why did you choose the US?
I didn't choose. The school chose for me. So I applied to Oxford in my J2, and then I got an offer. The offer said I had to come to Oxford within a year. And then I wrote in to say...
for 2-year deferment.
Yeah, to ask for deferment for 2 years. And after some pinging and ponging through my teachers, it was no, reapply next year. And then we'll talk about it again. So I've only applied to the UK in my J2 year because, all my teachers were British. They all knew the system very well. I didn't know anything about the UK. And when I got a rejection from Oxford, I was like, you know what? I should probably look into the US. And that's when I started applying to the US a lot more seriously. And in year 2 of NS, that's when I sent out maybe 20 to 30 applications.
Oh, so you didn't apply in year 1 of NS?
No, I didn't. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I waited till year 2.
Okay.
And yeah, so 20, 30 applications, I got maybe about 10 offers across the UK and the US. And by that time, I knew that I didn't know, but I had a sense that US was probably more suited to me at that point in time. So I chose Yale.
You chose Yale at that point. Okay, I see. Just for a little bit of context, again, a common question that we get from a lot of Singaporean students, especially the men who have to go to NS, is when should I apply? There's a lot of, I guess, a little bit of confusion, or there could be more clarity about the timelines. As a general rule of thumb, most US universities are willing to offer you a 2-year deferment. I'd say the major exception to that rule are the University of California schools. So you see Berkeley, LA, Irvine, Davis, and so forth. Most universities in the United Kingdom will only offer you a 1-year deferment. And some universities may not be happy with that either. So it's worth checking with each individual university. And in the case of Oxford and Cambridge, with each individual college.
Yes, absolutely.
So we were on the topic of national service, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. How did you in any way spend those 2 years wisely, as it were, continuing to build your profile? Obviously, for the US, yes, it did make a big difference because you were garnering all these experiences that you could then talk about. Anything specific that you want to talk about apart from the incident that you had told us about?
Yeah, so I think the thing about NS is you can make as much of it as you want.
Okay.
And some people pour themselves into NS. They really like the training, the regimen. They like camaraderie with your platoon mates. Some people choose to pretend they're sick and then and then excuse themselves from other activities, and they pursue things outside. And you know, it's a choice you make. And for me, I was lucky enough to be able to go on a lot of the courses in NS. So I did my 3 months of basic training, 9 months of officer school. I topped officer school, and then they sent me for 2 more months of higher level officer training called company tactics course. So actually, of my 1 year, 10 months in NS, I was on course like 1 year, 3 months. I only had 7 months of like active unit experience. So because of that, a lot of my time was just spent understanding military tactics, learning about leadership, which I really appreciated a lot. And of course, NS is not for everyone either. So a lot of people may go through the same process, but not like it. And in your free time, I would also encourage you to do whatever you can to pick up new hobbies, build your profile. And the 2 years is really what you make out of it.
Did you, so in the gaps, right, when you weren't actually, on some sort of exercise, or when you weren't in command school, did you have the time to pick up new hobbies or engage in new activities, build that profile as you recommended students?
Yeah, not really.
Not really. Okay.
Yeah, I was spending all my time, basically it was a stay-in camp. So Monday through Saturday morning, I would be in camp. And then when I was out of camp, it was like 24, 30 hours. I just slept a lot.
Okay.
Because it was really tiring. I was running operations all on course, which meant that, all the days are fully packed.
I do find it interesting that you managed to weave your Army experience quite explicitly into your application, because I think a lot of students are quite unsure of how to do that. Of course, it's a big part of your life because you're spending 2 years of it, and 2 very formative years in the Army. But at the same time, a lot of people feel it's just monotonous, right? You're doing the same thing day after day. So it's more about understanding and isolating the individual experiences that you learn something from, of which I'm sure there must be many for lots of students. I know that students in the past, there have been a lot of idiosyncrasies, right? And they've had very unique experiences, had very unique roles, right? And then they've weaved that into their application, or found some way in which it connects to what they want to do. But that's the first, I think, overtly explicit story or experience linked to the Army that I've heard. So that was really interesting. But once all that was over, right, and once you finally got to go to where the grass was greener, how did you actually like it in the US? Was it just Yale that you had applied to and got into, or were there several places that you were debating?
Yeah, so I got into 3 US schools in 3 regions: Berkeley in California, Chicago, in Chicago, and then Yale.
Freezing.
So those were my 3 options. And of course, in the UK, there was Oxford and LSE.
Right.
Along with UCL, can't remember the other 2, but they were all for PPE. So I made a decision based on prestige.
Okay.
Because at that time...
Is that what you recommend?
Not at all. Not at all. Because like I mentioned to you, like before that, the furthest I went was Europe. And before Europe, the furthest I went was Hong Kong, right? So this was actually my 3rd international trip in my life. And I have never visited campus. Please visit the campus before you make a decision. It has a huge bearing on your happiness in terms of the weather, the city, whether you like it.
I can't quite tell how you felt about Yale.
The
or was it New Haven?
Weather was terrible.
Okay.
First of all, it's dark and sludgy half the time you're there. And then the other half is like schizo between very hot or snowing the next day. So that was one thing I did not know. But once I got there, culture shock. real thing. Coming from a local school and going, I think, into a 90% American school with representation from all states, it's certainly something to get used to. So even basic things like how you pronounce certain words, what words you use, bathroom versus toilet, trunk versus boot.
Was that an actual... Seriously?
Yeah. Americans have one set of vocabulary, right? And it's not anything else outside of that.
They just pretend they don't understand it.
Creates
Or
confusion.
They genuinely don't understand.
Creates massive confusion. And then, of course, you have to say, it's the British system, and then explain that Singapore is a British colony, and then you speak English in Singapore. You go down that rabbit hole. So that's that initial shock of just day-to-day interactions. And then the second shock is on how much free play you have. There are options to not count your grades, not count a certain grade for a course.
Number,
a certain number.
Was your first semester ungraded as well? Or was it
wasn't,
it
but you can choose to.
You can choose, okay.
Yeah, I went in thinking I could do it. Bad idea. So I didn't do that well for my first semester. And I also didn't really know how to select my courses. Because I went in thinking, I want to be econ major, let's kill the econ classes straight away. Right. But I don't think that was necessarily the best use of a US style education, where I encourage more exploration, taking shopping seriously, and going to see different topics that were not offered at A levels. I think that's one thing I would have done differently.
So you did participate in shopping?
I did. Everyone does.
Everyone does.
Yeah, everyone will do it for 2 weeks. So yeah, it takes about, I think, 2 to 3 months for you to get used to the fact that you're actually in the US, you're actually at Yale, you're actually taking all these classes. Then reality sinks in, it turns dark, winter comes. And then, generally, first year, it's a time of adaptation because your family's not there. You're trying to make new friends, and you meet maybe hundreds of people, but you truly connect with a minority of them. Then what clubs do you join? That's another big question because there are hundreds and hundreds of clubs.
What did you end up joining?
I was in a couple. So I was in consulting club because that was a career that I was interested in. I was in the Model UN club as well, following up from my Model UN days. And a smattering of interest groups here and there.
Okay, so which was the one you were most committed to? Was it the consulting club? Or?
Yeah, consulting club.
So all the way. Is that still a career that you're interested in pursuing, just out of curiosity?
At this point in my career, not really. Because I see consulting more as a way for you to get a foot in the industry in your early years.
Okay.
So now I've had a few years under my belt. I know what direction I want to take. Generally within tech.
And would you recommend that students, when they actually go to university or when they first step foot there, they explore these different organizations that are there? So I know that consulting organizations, there certainly investment clubs as well. So if someone's interested in, say, finance or consulting, would you recommend that they try these organizations out and get sort of grassroots experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The benefit of that is we were really close to New York, right? So you could pull in actual investment bankers, consultants into these clubs to give you an overview and form an early impression of what the industry is. Then you also have, of course, people in the club with family members in those industries, and they can bring them in as well. So getting the exposure early is super important. And you also start to unpack, is the prestige commensurate with what you know about the industry and your interests? Because many of the industries are brutal, absolutely cutthroat, but the pay is high. You might not be happy, right? So you need to weigh these considerations, and it's best to have an early start there.
So we'll get to your career in just a second, but you had touched, while we're on the topic of happiness, I think you had touched on a few major factors that contribute to one's happiness while at university. And I guess two of them were location, weather, or climate. The third was, which I suspect was really important to you, is that of community, right? And since you lived at Yale in New Haven for 4 years, that residential community must have been a big factor. How did you find that? You've told us a little bit about your roommates, but what was the wider...
Yeah, so Yale has 12 residential colleges. I think they just built 2 more, so 14 now. and mine was Ezra Stiles College.
Okay.
Each college had a theme to it. So the mascot for my college was a moose. So they had a giant moose head hanging in the dining hall. And there was a Viking theme for some reason as well. So every year there's this giant event where, like Vikings, you put on your horn hats and you carry a sword and you plunder other colleges.
I have to see a picture of this. Qihan.
Oh yeah, it's great. And then, so the goal is to get as many other mascots from other colleges as possible.
Okay.
So, for example, the neighboring college had a whale. So there's a whale skeleton, like a mini whale. So one year they hoisted it down and then they brought it in the dining hall, and then you line up all the colleges mascots in a row. Then of course some colleges have learned of it, so they start defending. So it's really funny when people try and go into the college and then you're blocked off because the other college has lined up people in their door and trying to get their access.
But you guys won, I hope, with your tactical experience and whatnot.
Oh, there's nothing to win.
Well, yeah, I mean, taking
just,
the mascots and getting it down.
Yeah, but it wasn't a competition.
Did you ever have your moose head stolen?
No, it was a tradition like specific to this college.
So you'd go and take other people.
Yeah, so other people had other traditions. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever fall victim to any of those? Or
yeah, there were a couple.
Anything that you can talk about, or are they all a bit?
Let's see. Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, in any case, I've heard fabulous things about the food at Yale.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, breakfast looked fantastic. What was that like?
So it is a meal plan. So when you get to, I think most US colleges, if you stay on campus, you have to buy the meal plan. So at Yale, 90% of us were on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And Stiles, my college, was known to have the best food amongst all the colleges. They instituted a 6 p.m. rule where before 6 p.m., only people living in that college could eat there.
Okay.
And then once it gets to 6:01, a giant line forms outside. And a couple of reasons. One, we had the only pizza oven. We had the only burger station. And then there was always a seasonal Asian bowl called Da Bowl, made by one of our chefs.
Okay. Always a seasonal Asian bowl.
Yeah, so every day he changes it up. But Asian bowls in America is always a bit off. Like one time we had edamame with soy salmon on brown rice and corn, and that was a bowl.
Okay.
The next moment we had like deep fried tempeh with I don't know. It was just like whatever they thought of Asia, they put it in a bowl for that day.
Oh, well, at least the food was good. Can you actually choose which residential college you go to, or do they just assign?
Oh, that's randomly assigned. Yeah.
Randomly assigned. Mm-hmm. So the students can't choose to go to that one on purpose.
Yes. I suspect my college will be quite popular.
Yeah, I mean, I know what I'd choose. But what about your experience with the butteries?
The butteries.
Maybe what are butteries?
Yeah, so butteries are student-run pantries that operate at night. So in a residential college, there are some common facilities. You always have a game room. Mm-hmm. You have a laundry room. You have a kitchen. You have social spaces to hang out. Then there are some special rooms like theaters. My college had a 100-seater theater in the basement. There are photography labs where you can print your photos in a dark room. Mm-hmm. So the buttery is always located in one of these social spaces. And then at night, one of the students on shift that day would put out the menu. And it's always some kind of greasy food that can be made in 2 minutes. Yeah. Like a grilled cheese tortilla.
Yeah, well, it's comfort food at that point.
Or PB&Js.
It's all very late night eats as well.
Yeah. And it's they don't make money, so it's like 50 cents for a sandwich. Yeah. So it's a great like gathering place where people just come together after the classes, hang out.
Yeah, I used to work at the butteries at Yale and US College, and we'd make Indomie and iced Milo and all sorts of strange, very easy to make but yummy food. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we were open 3 nights a week, and then sometimes during the holidays as well. Did you ever spend winters or summers at the university? Yeah,
so I spent a summer doing a language program. Okay. I did Spanish, so it was a month in New Haven.
You speak Spanish?
I do.
Oh, nice, me too.
Oh.
Don't
¿Cómo
test me.
estás?
Don't. Muy bien. Muy bien. Y tú, Qihan?
Muy bien.
Okay.
Gracias.
Or maybe we'll switch back to English, not for my benefit, but for the benefit of the listeners and viewers. But
Yeah, so a month in New Haven, where it was intensive every day. You couldn't speak English or they fine you $1 each time.
Okay.
Then a month in Lima, Peru with a host family. So that was one summer. And then I loved it so much, I signed up for a study abroad semester after that. So it's with this organization called International Honors Program. And, you did it too. Okay.
Yeah, wait, tell me about
I did
yours
cities
first.
in the 21st century.
Okay.
What do you do?
I did human rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my 4 countries were New York, US, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Cape Town, South Africa, and Hanoi, Vietnam.
Okay, so I think they've changed that slightly now for
Yeah.
cities. So Cape Town is still very much there, but I think they've switched to Rio.
Mm-hmm.
And Hanoi is not there
It's
anymore.
better than Sao Paulo, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't think Hong Kong is there anymore. I think it might actually be Nepal. But we started off in New York. I think it switches in like whether it's in whichever season you go to. So
Yeah.
sometimes they start off in Atlanta, but we started in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went to Santiago in Chile, and then went down south to the Curare region. And then we were in Kathmandu in Nepal, and we finished off in Amman.
Very
in
nice.
Jordan. Yeah, I didn't know you did IHP.
Wow, yeah.
I don't know how we haven't hit on that in our conversation before, but I loved it.
I loved it
Fantastic
too.
time.
So it was an urban studies program where 4 professors follow you, and each of them teach a module, meaning you have 4 professors like basically with you all the time, and the city is your classroom, and you learned about you will speak to developers to get the sense of how city planning is done at a commercial level. And the next day you're in a homeless organization and then they will rant against the developer on how they are like gentrifying spaces. And
Was it a mainly American? Like were the people over there mainly Americans?
the participants? Yeah. So I think I was one of 2 international kids.
Yeah, same.
Then there were 18 Americans. Yeah, and all of them came from variety of schools.
So I think things have changed since you went. So there were more students on mine. I think there were 27 in total. Only 3 of us were guys.
Okay.
And one professor that follows us around, and then their local professor.
I
as well.
see.
So I don't think it's 4 anymore. So yours was 5-6 months, half a year?
1 semester, 5 months.
One semester. Okay. So back in the day when IHP started, I think it was a year-long program.
Yes.
And then they do 6 countries over the span of the year. I mean, that would be lots of fun.
Yeah.
But I had fun over
the I wouldn't mind doing it again.
Program. I wouldn't mind doing it again either. They do have master's programs, I think, by the way. So there's always worth checking that out in the future. So in the interest of time, I think we move on to your professional life. You spent some time with various ministries in the Singaporean government.
Yeah.
Tell us anything about that. How did you find your time
Yeah,
there?
sure. So I was in Ministry of National Development for 3 years, then finance for 2+. So I was looking at an issue very close to Singaporeans' hearts, public housing.
Of course.
HDB policy.
All my friends trying to get a BTO now. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So it's a 50-year-old policy, right? So I was there trying to understand the system, how it worked, trying to drive some digital transformation. Because as you can imagine, you have paper records, you have like things stuck in MS-DOS, you have things in the current system. How do you do that migration? So yeah, that was also a good taste of tech, where I am now.
Legend has it you were at G20.
Oh yes, I was at G20. So they will send young officers as staffers with the ministers. So what you do is you handle logistics, you take notes, but really it's a good learning experience just to see what is discussed at high levels and be able to make friends with your counterparts in other countries. So it may sound pretty menial, but the access and the networks that you build from these trips, phenomenal.
And that you were talking about your tech experience. So did that help in your transition to Google? Was tech a long-term goal? I have all this experience. Here are some industries I can look at. Let's go for it.
So yes, I applied to a couple of companies. The first one was Google. They got back to me almost immediately in 2 weeks, and I took it. So I would say it was more good luck, good timing than anything.
Which is what I think everybody needs at some point.
Sure, yeah.
And of course, positioning can help. And I think to that extent, or on that note rather, a lot of our students are really interested in a career in tech, right? They want to study maybe computer science or any other major with the long-term goal of perhaps going into tech one day, companies like Google are, of course, a natural goal, right? In terms of that overall career pathway. Do you have any advice for them? Maybe at the, maybe the high school level, or if that's too early at the university level?
Yeah, so just now I mentioned a lot of my suite mates were engineers, right? There was a computer engineer, there was an electrical engineer. And I didn't understand why, because coming from humanities, coming from Singapore, I think the emphasis is a lot more on, finance, on law. Those are some of our biggest industries. Engineering is not really a coveted industry. So when I got there, I started to realize how different the economic model was in the US. And engineers are well sought after, like you said, in tech, as building hardware, building programs. So the advice there is really to understand that different countries offer you different opportunities. So in the UK, you're going to have you are going to be close to Europe. You're no longer part of the EU, but the opportunities there are also different. And tech goes through boom and bust cycles, right? Right now, we're witnessing, I think, quite a big bust of it. And you can't predict what will happen when you graduate. So ultimately, you need to be able to have enough interest in the subject to sustain yourself for 4 years, 3 years or 4 years. And, some people graduated in the midst of COVID, couldn't find any jobs, right? And then that is out of your control. So really gather as much information as you can about the industries, about majors. And there's another point to be made there that what you study might not lead to what you do, right? I did economics, suddenly I am a product lead.
Yeah.
All right. So there is still a lot of room for growth and change in school, and beyond school. And keeping a curious mind, learning mindset, I think those are the most important skills you can have to future-proof yourself.
And working with curious students is something that you do in your capacity as a consultant or profile building consultant here at IvyPrep. What made you come back to this field, rather the education industry in the first place?
Yeah, it goes back to, like I said, I wish I had a similar service when I was 16 or 17. I wish there was someone to be able to tell me about the world, potential options, impart some wisdom about time management. And it's my way of giving back. And I particularly enjoy this program because who I work with are 16, 17-year-olds who are a year or two away from application. So you have the luxury of time to think about the bigger questions. When you're 18 or 20 in NS, all you want to do is get your personal statement done, get your list of schools done, get your teacher references. So the pressure is not felt as much at the program that I run. And I really enjoy running through what are your values, where do you see yourself, and trying to shape at that early stage.
Okay. And as a parting note, do you have any advice for students out there, or maybe even parents that might be tuning in to watch this?
Start early.
Okay.
So where this program, I would say, has been really helpful for the students that I have been working with. The feedback is always that it reduces the anxieties because you gather more information, you're more clear on processes. But it also reduces anxieties because you are more clear on who you are and what schools and what systems are suited for you. So with these two in mind, they are more prepared. In the US, they also can go for early decision, early action. That's where we see 3 times higher acceptance rates than regular, because the most prepared students always apply early. So time is the biggest asset you have. Use it well.
Well, thank you very much, Qihan, for your time and for all the insights that you've granted us today. And thank you, dear applicants, for joining us today. Please do like, subscribe, come down, have a chat with us. But in the meantime, have a good day and see you next time around.